Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Excellent.
So far?
You've been paying attention to these Alito hearings that are finally underway, I take it?
Not much. They started today, but it was just taken up with questioning and his opening statement. Nothing much seems to have happened.
Well, you know, I'm kind of happy about this because, as you know, weeks ago when we discussed Alito, I expressed the view that there was too much attention being paid to Roe versus Wade and that a more urgent issue was civil liberties that would loom larger in our future, and I was worried that he was far from a civil libertarian. My wish has come true thanks to the intervention of this wiretapping scandal, right? There's at least as much attention now on his views on executive power and civil liberties as there is on Roe v. Wade and so on?
I think so. Lindsey Graham has pledged to grill him on it. Dahlia Lithwick wrote a very good article in Slate in early December, which I think was even before the wiretapping scandal, saying that he's shown no indication at any time in his career that he will put a limit on executive power.
Yes,
so
I gave us a preview of that. As you may recall, I had spoken to Dahlia.
Okay.
So our viewers got that story first.
And on the other hand, the decision in Hamdi was 8-1 against the administration. So even if it's 7-2 on cases like that, there's still some room to have a statist in there.
Well, yeah, but Mickey, in
other
times,
cases may be closer.
if things heat up in the terrorism front, if it's right in the wake of a 9/11 or something, that's going to be swinging to 7-2 the other way or something. So that seems like not an especially reassuring point that you're making to me.
I agree. It would not be, and Bush has asserted executive power that seems to have no check. It's just in his discretion. So you want some indication that Alito sees that that's a potential problem, that we want to live in a system where the president doesn't have unlimited discretion. You wouldn't think that would be hard to do. I mean, he's a lawyer. Lawyers are all about cabining discretion.
You mean it wouldn't be hard for him to convey that, whether or not it's true?
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's always...
And I'm not convinced that he believes in limitless federal power. My working assumption is that the most important thing about all these Supreme Court nominees is that they're lawyers. Lawyers exist to have hearings. The idea that the president's going to be able to detain thousands of people without hearings runs against everything that lawyers stand for, and that's why Bush lost 8-1 in the Hamdi case.
But we've seen what happens when you've got a wartime mentality in World War II. They locked up everybody who's Japanese.
Yes, although we can get into that. It seems to me it's very easy to condemn it in hindsight.
Well, okay, maybe you're saying you'd be on Alito's side, but that's different from saying that somebody like me, a civil libertarian, doesn't have to worry about how he's going to vote. Which is it that you're saying?
Right. No. I'm saying we should worry. I'm just saying that there are reasons to to believe him if he gives indications that he doesn't believe in unbridled executive power. If your position is that anything he says is a smokescreen anyway, then you got to vote against him. But
your reason is just that lawyers, are broadly predictable, and that seems to me crazy. I can show you plenty of, or look at Dershowitz after 9/11. Immediately comes out in favor of torture. Who would have predicted that?
A lot of people would have predicted that. But, because of Dershowitz. But
well, you mean because he's an opportunist, but not because he's
an opportunist, and I think he's a big...
that's a different...
Very pro-Israel, right?
Different argument.
Yeah.
Anyway, is there any chance that he's going to get stopped? There isn't, right?
I don't think so, but the key point is that the Democrats are perfectly justified in voting him down if they don't like him. Kimsey wrote a pretty good column where he said the main complaint against him is he's just too conservative. It's not that he's not qualified, not that he's not smart, not that he's not cautious. He just, the Senate is functioning as the court functions as a legislature, and the Senate is functioning as the membership committee of who gets to be on that legislature. And it's completely acceptable for Democrats to say, we just want somebody more liberal.
Although on this one issue, actually the ideology is a little ambiguous. There are principled conservatives who are civil libertarians. Right. So it's
right. Who we disagree with his views. We have no We can't say that they're crazy. We can't say that they don't have precedent. We just disagree with them. And this idea that he's going to get by saying, won't let my personal views influence my decisions. Well, all he has to make the decision is his personal views. He's been an appellate judge where you have to follow Supreme Court precedents. Now he's going to be on the Supreme Court where he's setting the precedents. The only thing he really has to guide him anymore in a lot of these cases are his personal views. So to say he's not going to let them affect his decisions is completely disingenuous. On the other hand, he may be the best we're going to get. So there are practical considerations that enter into it.
Better than Harriet Myers, you think, huh?
I don't think he's less conservative than Myers. I think he's probably more conservative, but he's certainly more qualified. And he certainly seems to have put the senators at ease. I also think the Democrats are perfectly justified in filibustering him. It's such a politicized court that I think our only hope is that we have to get people who command a supermajority. And 60 votes is a fine standard. And if the Democrats can muster 41 votes against him, the Bush should nominate somebody else. Then he has to compromise. But I don't think that'll happen. He seems so boring generally that there's nothing to sink your teeth into.
Yeah. So all this money was wasted, all these ads and counter ads?
Pretty much, although, people gave money to these organizations because they wanted to see those ads, so if they didn't create a little stir...
Well, and if the ads had created a stir, the outcome might be different, right? I mean, enough of a stir. In other words, this is an instrument of influence. I mean, these people in Congress are watching the polls, right?
Well, sure. Well, that's fine.
Yeah. I saw a kind of good cartoon, a takeoff on It's a Wonderful Life, an anti-Alito cartoon, which we can link to. I mean, a flash animation cartoon.
It was a good cartoon. I mean, I'm not sure it's accurate, but it was while I was seeing it, I was convinced that I should care about this.
Well, this thing was hyperbolic, but I thought kind of in an ironic, self-conscious way. They're all hyperbolic. This one was just amusingly hyperbolic.
You saw more irony in it than I did.
Maybe so.
But maybe there's a little bit.
I've been known to do that. Well, about bell time on Alito, I think.
Okay.
Mickey, one thing I can always count on you for is to have the lowdown on the latest contagious disease. And this bird flu thing, I'm not totally up on. I mean, I know the big looming question is, when does it mutate so that it can be transmitted from human to human, at which point we're all in trouble. I also know that every time I hear an expert interviewed on the radio, they seem to say it's pretty much inevitable that there's going to be some big pandemic, and it's just a question of how bad it is and how we control it, and how lethal the virus is. It may turn out that in the course of evolving, it becomes less lethal. But
right.
What's the
key? There was an article in Slate that said, because of the molecular structure of this flu, that it would be unlikely to evolve the same way that the last pandemic in 1918, I think, evolved. It was wildly unconvincing because there might be other mutations that are just as lethal. The key point that another Slate author made that I haven't seen anywhere is the risk comes when a man with the human flu contracts the avian flu. So you get a farmer who's working with birds. He has the flu, the regular flu that we all get. He gets the avian flu, and somehow the two viruses mix and produce a hybrid strain that can be passed from human to human like the regular flu, but is deadly like the bird flu. Now, the chances that any one of those mutations will be the deadly version is slim. But if you get 20 farmers or 100 farmers who have the flu who get this, then the chances are very high that one of them is going to be the killer germ.
Yeah.
I hadn't realized that. But that leads to me to think that it's very important to just squelch the flu worldwide. Because the fewer farmers that have the flu, the less chance there is that one of them is also going to get the avian flu while he has the flu.
Well, the other thing is to make transmission more difficult for the virus, because apparently viruses evolve often so that the easier it is for them to transmit themselves, the more lethal they can afford to become. They saw this with AIDS, where you could see how it evolved in different environments, and the more promiscuous sex there was, the more lethal it could afford to become, because it's going to hop onto the next body right away. It's you can go ahead and kill the one sentence the one you're inhabiting to an early death and still migrate to different bodies, and the evolution of viruses takes this into account. So I guess we should all stay at home and communicate by email and watch video.
And wear masks.
What's that?
And we should also wear masks.
That too.
Maybe everybody in Turkey should wear masks. It is spreading in Turkey. It's reached the outskirts of Ankara, according to the latest report.
But it's all bird-to-human transmission so far.
So far, yes. But, you know, the question is, how many of those people it's infecting have the regular flu and with the bad results that we talked about? The other interesting thing is Tamiflu. It's an anti-influenza virus, which people I know, sort of affluent people, are starting to stockpile. And it's become a real class thing. If you're rich, you sort of got some connection, and you have a secret stash of Tamiflu ready for the pandemic. This is what it looks like. Of course, this box is, of course, empty. But
they also say that there's a decent chance that the mutated form that turns out to be the thing you worry about will not be susceptible to Tamiflu, right?
Well, some of the cases in Vietnam have been resistant to Tamiflu. And the response of the bureaucrats has been, well, you just got to take more Tamiflu.
But won't that create more resistant?
Yes, but...
So your friends are free riders on the health of the rest of us.
In what sense?
The more they use Tamiflu, the worse that is for those of us who don't stockpile it, because they're making the virus more lethal.
Well, except they're stockpiling it, they're not using it.
Well, but they will use it if the thing shows up, right?
Right, but if the thing shows up, the more people that take Tamiflu, the better, because it increases the chances that the germ will never reach the tipping point, no? I mean...
I don't know, but I thought you were saying it would stand the chance of creating a Tamiflu-resistant virus. I guess the deal... Well, I don't know. I know that with antibiotics, like antibacterial soap, that's basically, by and large, a bad thing.
Right.
But maybe that's because it doesn't kill all of them. I think that is. It's because you wash your hands with it. It doesn't kill all of them. It just kills the weakest, and so it creates a stronger strain. At this point, neither of us has any idea what we're talking about.
People aren't going to take Tamiflu if they don't have the flu, and I can't believe that the odds are that it's a bad thing to try to cure the flu if you have the flu. I assume that does eventually breed resistance, but it's probably better than just taking the flu and dying and spreading it to all your friends. My friends who've taken Tamiflu said it works like a miracle.
Well, to ward off regular flu, you mean?
It kills regular flu in like a day. One pill in the course of 10 will kill the flu, and then they tell you to take the next 9, but people are
that's the key, is doing that. If they don't do that, then that is bad for the rest of us, because if you stronger viruses escape.
Right, people aren't taking the next 9 because they're saving it for the pandemic.
Oh, man, now that's a story. You should have led with that.
Okay, and there's, of course, an anti-Bush angle, which is other countries have much more Tamiflu in stock than we do. France has it enough for a quarter of the population. We have enough for 1.5% of the population.
So, but let me be clear. What your friends are doing is creating a stronger strain of the conventional flu virus right now. They're not creating a stronger strain of the bird flu. I'm not accusing them of that. I may be accusing them of that in a few months.
Yes, but in theory, I don't know that my friends have had a recurrence of a stronger flu once they stop taking Tamiflu. But yes, that is the potential that they're not following through with the course, and because everybody's hoarding.
Yeah.
It's also the classic issue where if Bush really is a class-based elitist, where he would think, well, my friends are taken care of, so he would worry less about, like the rest of the population. It's a case where what was largely a fiction about New Orleans might actually be true. Because they have enough to protect everybody in government. They don't have enough to protect the general population.
And everybody in the oil business. But I would never accuse our president of being an elitist.
Yeah, Halliburton, they all have it at Halliburton.
Yeah. They're swimming in it.
Okay.
Well... Enough about something that I had zero data on, but was nonetheless willing to speculate on endlessly. Something I actually do have some data on is the movie Munich. I went to see it.
Yeah.
And first of all, what's your sense? Who's winning the PR war? There was an attack on the movie from the David Brookses of the world. A preemptive strike weeks and weeks ago.
Well, who's defending the movie? I mean, nobody.
I'm about to.
Okay, well, you can do that. But,
A very good piece by someone named Michelle Goldberg. Do we know that name? Is that a well-known byline?
No.
Anyway, on the Der Spiegel website, defending it, and I've seen others, and I thought it was very good.
I mean,
and also David Edelstein, the renowned movie critic, says it's the best movie of the year.
Well, the argument that Brooks makes is it says that you can never squelch terror with a violent campaign, and that Ariel Sharon has in fact squelched the Intifada with a violent campaign.
Actually, Brooks, he doesn't quite make that argument explicitly.
He did on TV yesterday.
Oh, okay. Well, I think he's... I read his column on the subject, and I think it's really, really muddled. I mean, there's two charges against the movie. Let me first be clear on what kind of I think the movie says and doesn't say. One charge is that it buys into moral equivalence. And I certainly don't think anywhere in the movie it gives equal moral status to the Palestinian terrorists who killed innocent Olympic athletes in 1972 and people who kill terrorists who have already killed people. I don't think it asserts that moral equivalence at all.
Okay.
It does assert some kinds of equivalence that are not often asserted, especially in the modern political environment, and I thought it was very courageous in doing that. I mean, I think it was an extremely courageous act for Spielberg. I think it's going to complicate his life and some of his social relations for a long time. And Tony Kushner's, who co-wrote the screenplay as well. Some kinds of symmetry it does assert. First of all, it takes pains to show that the Palestinians who orchestrate the terrorists are human beings. They have sons and daughters who will be anguished when their parents are killed.
Right.
And they laugh and cry like the rest of us. And if you meet them on the street when they're not busy orchestrating a terrorist plot, you might not know they're terrorists. They might seem so human. Now, to me, it's like, what's the alternative hypothesis? I know that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, that you would depict these people as human, but I really am not sure what the alternative hypothesis is there. I understand what political effect the critics of the movie worry about there, but I don't understand how they could kind of claim it's not the case.
But what's your other point? What's the other thing?
The other main symmetry asserted by the movie is that the Palestinian claim to their what they see as their homeland is possibly as historically valid, or certainly at least as heartfelt, as the Jewish claim, the Zionist claim to the homeland. Now, that's not the same as saying that at this point the Palestinian claim to the land within Israel's internationally recognized borders is valid. That's just not implied by pointing out that these people, that the history, if you go way back, the history is ambiguous. These people have been living there. They feel about it as strongly as the Israelis do. That, again, I think is essentially a statement of fact. Now, again, you may not like the political consequences of pointing it out, but that's the other symmetry that, so far as I could tell, was really asserted.
What about I think Leon Wieselter's objection, if I remember right, is that all the Israelis portrayed in the film are murderous in some sense.
That is out and out. That is so false. I wonder what movie you saw. And this is a point that Michelle Goldberg makes in her piece, which I'll link to. That's just so manifestly false. I
may be mischaracterizing what his charge was.
Of the 5 on the assassination team, on the Israeli assassination team, one of them is kind of a cowboy. The other 4 are people who are wrestling with their scruples over the whole thing, and that's just a false charge. The bulk of the message of the movie, as far as I could tell, was merely a pragmatic, strategic point, which is Spielberg and Kushner are asserting that a policy of robust tit-for-tat retaliation doesn't work. And you can argue that point, and Brooks does, but I think he does it ineffectually, and in any event, that's not an assertion of moral equivalence. It's an arguable point.
Do you think that's right, though?
What's that?
Well, Brooks didn't make the charge of moral equivalence, did he?
No, he did not. But I'm saying he addresses he addresses what the movie actually is largely about. I think the strategic, pragmatic point. I think he gets it completely wrong. I mean, here's a line from his column. He says, Spielberg, by choosing a story set in 1972, Spielberg allows himself to ignore the core poison that permeates the Middle East, Islamic radicalism. In Spielberg's Middle East, there is no Hamas or Islamic Jihad. There are no passionate anti-Semites, no Holocaust deniers like the current president of Iran, no zealots who want to exterminate Israelis. Now, the point he's making, I think, is that it's not fair to take a movie, use it as a comment on a current, very virulent environment when it's based in a at least relatively more benign environment.
Right.
But that's Spielberg's line. Since Israel initiated this policy in 1972, things have gotten worse. That's a major Spielberg data point, and Brooks seems completely unaware of it in his column, and probably still is.
Have things gotten worse? It seems to me virulent anti-Semitism has been a semi-permanent fixture of the Arab world.
Well,
for
anyway,
decades.
what Brooks is saying, it's worse now. That's the only interpretation I can put on this paragraph. Read it for yourself. I'll link to it.
Right.
He seems to be saying the current environment, Islamic extremism is much more pronounced, and it certainly is in the occupied territory. During this period, since this policy was initiated, the Palestinian resistance has come to have much more of a religious dimension and a more radical dimension. It's undeniable. I haven't heard anybody deny that.
Do you think tit-for-tat retaliation is never an effective
No, I wouldn't say it's never
strategy?
effective. I would say Israel has more than once used it in what I consider a counterproductive way. I'm probably not as extreme on that point as Tony Kushner. I don't know. But the point is Brooks's reply is just ineffectual. Now here he says, in the real Middle East, the only way to achieve peace is through military victory over the fanatics, accompanied by compromise between the reasonable elements on each side. Well, again, military victory over the fanatics, that by his own analysis, the number of fanatics has grown tremendously since this policy was initiated.
If you don't think tit-for-tat retaliation works, what might work is 30 tits for tat. In other words, maybe the problem with tit-for-tat retaliation is it's too mincing. It should be overwhelming.
You're the first person I've heard accuse Israel's tit-for-tat policy of being mincing, Mickey, and I'm not sure you were paying attention to the Sharon era. If you really think that. And speaking of Sharon, you said that his tit-for-tat policy had been effective. The terrorism has certainly gone down. Everyone I know who's been over there, journalists and so on, agree. The terrorism has gone down over the last couple of years under Sharon. They also all agree on why. It's the wall he built. It's the wall he built. All the tit-for-tat stuff, things were just getting worse during the tit-for-tat era that was unaccompanied by the building of the wall. It's just making it physically harder for the terrorists to do what they wanted to do. That has been successful. And I think, in principle, that could be effective. I personally think where they're building the wall is in the long run going to make the terrorism that Israel has to fend off worse. So I think the wall, exactly as it's built, is a bad idea, exactly where it's built. And you get back to the settlements. But I mean, the movie has really been slandered when people accuse it of some kind of naive, simplistic moral relativism. And people like David Brooks, who have tried to take on the pragmatic point it's making, as far as I've seen, have just dug themselves a deeper hole, at least in Brooks's case.
That's very interesting. I haven't seen it, but you're definitely right that Spielberg, I think, is losing this argument.
In the PR camp, yeah. Well, he shouldn't be. I mean, I have issues with the movie, but the other thing is about the historical accuracy of it. It is, by its own account, historical fiction. That is to say, it's based on something that really happened. Israel did set out to do targeted assassinations in response to Munich. And then after that, there's a whole lot of simplification and dramatization, and in my view, in a couple of cases, over-dramatization of the kind that directors are prone to. But setting out to debunk it, fact by fact is just entirely missing the point. If you look at the issues it's trying to address, both the moral issues and the strategic issues, it's the plot it constructs is adequate for that.
Does it work as a thriller, or is it a movie I have to go with?
It was not a sit on the edge of your seat thriller. It was.
Yeah.
I found it engrossing.
Right.
And nobody does graphic violence more powerfully than Spielberg, I think. And he does a fair amount of it. It gets your attention, and he succeeds in making it repellent, which is what he wants to do.
Right.
I wouldn't call it. It was not a thriller. It's an action flick for sure.
Right.
And I found it very engrossing.
Okay, I'll go see it.
You should.
Now, I'm told that you have a point about social kissing.
Yeah, we're getting the topics are getting steadily more momentous as we move along here.
Well, this is like the happy talk part of our video cast here.
Yeah, no, it's a long-standing kind of burning grievance of mine, social kissing. I'm against it, and before I get into why, I'd like to hear you make the case for it. What's the upside?
By social
you know what I
kissing?
mean by social kissing, right? That is a term of art.
What do you mean by this? Yes.
I mean, kissing as a greeting people that you're not either romantically involved with or related to. We just had the holiday season, and that's why it's fresh on my mind, all this social kissing. Kissing the wives of your friends and stuff.
Sorry?
Kissing the wives of your friends, stuff like that.
It's European.
Exactly.
It fosters a sense of intimacy beyond shaking hands.
Well,
Which is
that what we want? Do we want to make you more intimate with the wives of men you know?
Well,
do you like it? Level with me. Do you really like it? Do you wish it would go away?
No, I don't wish it would go away because shaking hands is just as unhygienic, even more so.
But shaking hands is so much simpler. Everyone you see, you know what the deal is. You shake their hands. My big gripe about social kissing is it leads to all this uncertainty, right? Because you're not supposed to kiss every woman, and even the women you're supposed to do social kissing with, you don't do it on every occasion. If you see them at an academic conference, you don't. But if you see them at,
right.
at a holiday
and all this is a
so, well, what about lunch? What about coffee? I mean,
Bob, this is life. One of the
everything
functions
is life.
One of the functions of kissing people socially sometimes and not others is to make this distinction of saying, oh, you're a professional colleague, oh, you're a social colleague. Making those distinctions is very useful. It's very useful for people to know where they stand.
Don't you agree that a lot of awkwardness is generated by this? Don't you find yourself thinking, well, what am I supposed to do with her?
God, I'm the most awkward guy in the world, and even I don't find this especially
difficult. Well, part of it is,
difficult.
I got to admit, my upbringing. In my culture, you kiss another man's wife, you die. It was that simple. It was a great culture.
That's because you're from Texas.
West Texas farm families, more specifically. I mean, that's where my parents came from.
Even a peck on the cheek?
You keep your mouth away from the man's wife. It's very simple. And there was a lower divorce rate. You know that at least some extramarital affairs have gotten started through social kissing, right? You don't deny that. You subtly send a signal. You firmly grasp her hand.
Well, I think that's probably one of the subtle functions of it is to.
Well, I would call that a dysfunction.
So you in West Texas, you shook hands with your neighbor's wife, or you just waved?
To be honest, my parents were not that socially active, so I don't have any data on that. It was mostly relatives. I think my father was in the Army, and his life in the Army drew him inexorably into probably a little more social kissing than you would have otherwise seen.
Well, we need to substitute for the handshake because Donald Trump and various people in Hollywood refuse to shake hands on the grounds that it's unsanitary and it's a medieval custom, which I think it is.
It's very egalitarian. You shake hands with all men. Now, here's my question with you. Why should you have a gesture, a greeting that makes the distinction you described in the case of women, but doesn't in the case of men? I don't get it. Either it's good to make or it's not.
Well,
and it
Bob,
seems to me...
You're a Darwinian. You recognize that there are biological differences between men and women, and this is a social acknowledgement of that. First
of all, if someone is already married, those differences should be irrelevant to the way you treat her. Secondly, shouldn't this have been an accomplishment of feminism? Shouldn't all feminists everywhere be singing my praises right now?
I think they probably are, but
I think I hear them.
I've insulted enough women by shaking hands with them to think that.
Well, yeah, but that's because of this ridiculous. And how do you know? I hate it. I mean, I hate the uncertainty. I don't want
to. Okay, well, you're safe from me.
Okay, well, do you think I've started a social movement here? Do you think people, like-minded people, will copy and paste the link to this topic, which
I think it's
is
incredibly.
By the way, it's in the URL address bar right up there right now.
It's incredibly viral. I think it's.
The viral topic, not social kissing.
Right,
which is actually less viral than handshaking.
Probably viral too, but I plan to wear my mask full time now, so social kissing will be out of the question for me.
Okay, I want to clarify. I'm not actually as steamed about this as I've been acting as if I am, but I am serious. Life would be simpler and more egalitarian, gender-wise, class-wise, every-wise.
Okay.
What else? We got a little housekeeping to do?
Yes.
Okay, now, you may recall, you may not either, but 2 or 3 months ago, right before we began this venture, you vetoed my idea of using the word Diavlog on the website itself, right?
Did I?
Yeah, I knew you. You forget all the bad advice you give me, and then that's a full-time job, but let's not get into that.
But luckily you remember it, so.
I'm very good at it. Now, predictably, this has had bad consequences, namely the following. When I finally got around to using the word Diavlog in late December to describe a particular, genre we were using on Bloggingheads TV, it turned out that, like a couple of days before or something, someone had used the term Diavlog in our Wikipedia entry. His name is Jason Kiernan, and he brought this fact to my attention. So 20 years from now, his name will be in the Oxford English Dictionary. My name will not be, and you're the one we have to thank for this.
Well, can't you organize? Charles Darwin faced the same problem with Alfred Russel Wallace. Was that the guy's name?
That was his name.
Who discovered
Darwin was
evolution.
a much less scrupulous man than I am.
But it seems to me he took very effective action that basically banished this guy from history.
Well, not quite, but Darwin did, by my interpretation, take action that succeeded in relegating Wallace to secondary status, which wasn't totally unjustified. Darwin had thought of the idea first, but he was not the first who was ready to publish. Well, anyway, enough about Darwin. Let's talk about me.
You're in exactly the same position. This other guy published first, so
yeah, but now
screwed.
We're in the age of the World Wide Web. The little guy is empowered, Mickey, and in fact, he's written something in which I think he graciously agrees that maybe he should accept tertiary status as the originator of this term. But just to show you what a big guy I am, I say no. Jason Kiernan is the guy. He was the first person to describe in print, or publicly for that matter, what we do on the site as Diavlogs. I encourage the OED to single him out in the future, and if I'm the mere asterisk, that's fine. Mickey, you know me, I'm not in it for the glory, right?
I thought wasn't there some other guy who wrote a very funny blog entry? Was that this guy?
That's the guy.
That's the guy.
I think it's maybe the funny entry. I don't think it's on a blog per se. Anyway, I'll link to it and we'll see if it's the guy you're talking about. And meanwhile, we've already said that we're going to officially use the term Diavlog to refer to everything on this site that involves two people, including the genre you see now.
Right.
Secondly, we're actually going to put the term on the site. Where it once said dialogues, it will soon say Diavlogs. And that way we can maybe propel Kiernan's name into the OED.
My impression is that people don't get nearly enough credit for inventing words. The man who invented the word blogosphere, for example, has not gotten rich off it as far as I can see.
Who is that?
Oh, I think it's a guy named Quick, but I'm not sure. Instapundit always credits him.
Can you name the guy who invented the phrase World Wide Web? Because he's the same guy who invented the World Wide Web.
Well, if you invent the World Wide Web, then you're in better shape.
He did both.
Richard Rosen invented the word psychobabble. Has he gotten rich? I doubt it.
But do you even know who invented the World Wide Web and the term World Wide Web? Because this will be a good test of how unjust life is.
That would be Tim Berners-Lee, I believe.
Very good. Excellent.
There you go. I got both Alfred Russel Wallace and Tim Berners-Lee in the same Diavlog.
You are a walking blogosphere, Mickey. You
Pretty
are a walking
great.
Google.
That's why they pay me the big bucks. So we will try to claim as much credit for this word as possible, and then the word will die, and it'll all be in vain. So,
claim as much credit, you say?
as possible.
No,
yes.
my strategy is the opposite. I'm going to prove what a large man I am.
In keeping with your general strategy of promoting yourself by spurious self-effacement.
That we could have saved that for our offline discussion. Hey, gotta go. Some software.
Maybe.
See you around.
Okay. See ya.